Everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm back today with another Let's Make a Scene card. Now I do a lot of masking and I always like to show the videos of that because every time you mask a scene it's different. Not only that, but anytime you mask a scene you might be using a different mask to put over your stamped images, use different coloring mediums. So I like to show step by step just because this is a technique that's so versatile and every time you use it, it's a little bit different. Not to mention, it's my favorite technique to use. I just always love it and I love the reveal. But what I started to do with this scene is I first used the Fancy Frames die set from Craft and Desert Divas, and I did inlay die cutting to create a frame and then a panel inside that for my scene. And I'm going to be putting those on two different levels to create that frame, and you'll see what I mean whenever I finish this card off. But I'll be using the Market Stand stamp set. This is brand new this month. And for the larger stamps that I'll be stamping, I'll use my Misty. For the smaller ones, I just use an acrylic black. An acrylic black will stamp all of these just fine. You don't need the Misty. I just like to use it in case I mess up. I'll also be using Memento Tuxedo Black ink to do all of my stamping, but you want to use an ink that will play nicely with whatever coloring medium you decide. I also went ahead beforehand and stamped all of my images out onto Inka Dinka Doo masking paper. And then I went ahead and trimmed those out or fussy cut them out. I always like to create my mask beforehand just because it takes a little bit of time to do it. So what I do is I go ahead and stamp out all of my images. I never know what exactly I'm going to use, so I just stamp a variety, sometimes all of them like I did in this case. And I just stamp them out onto that paper and then go sit down while I'm watching a movie or a TV show, whatever. And I trim them out while I'm watching that, and that kind of helps the time go by a little bit quicker. So that's why you never see me trim them out. Now I started out with the little girl and she is carrying a basket. So I went ahead and stamped her, put the mask over, stamped the tomato, and that is going to allow it to look like that tomato is actually in her little bag. Then I stamped the flower pot in the lower right hand corner and also the little basket or bucket. I'm guessing it's a basket, but it's right in the center of that. And I wanted it to look like it's a little bit behind that flower pot. And what you need to do whenever you want something behind something else, you need to make it a little bit higher in your scene. So you can see, like I stamped this watermelon here, it's going to be behind that basket. So I needed to just move it up just a little bit from that basket, and that's going to make it look like it is really behind there. The same thing is going to go for this little basket of apples. If I were to stamp it below that basket that I stamped beforehand, it's going to look off. So as you stamp and you keep going behind other images, you need to move them up on your paper a little bit. The same is going to go for this market stand. I have been placing masks down as I go, and now I'm going to go ahead and stamp this larger market stand, and I'll be using my Misty for this one because it is a larger stamp. So I'll go ahead and put it on there, close the door, my Misty, and then I'll go ahead and stamp this down. This is, again, I pushed it up a little bit on my paper so it's looking like it is behind everything else that I've already stamped. Also, you'll notice that I didn't take my paper out to do any of my other stamping. I left it in my Misty. The Misty has a foam pad under it whenever you're using your clear stamps that help give them just a little bit better of an impression. So I just leave it in there and stamp on that, and it works out really well. Now, as you're putting down more and more masks and you start stamping images over those masks, you are going to maybe need to give them a few stampings just because it doesn't want to go right up to that stamped line. So if you don't have the Misty and you don't trust yourself to go over stamped images, like I don't trust myself to stamp directly on top, I never can get it just quite right. What you can do is take a pen, whether it goes with your coloring medium or not. If it doesn't, do it after you've colored. If it does, you can do it beforehand. And just fill in those little lines where they need to connect, and that'll save the day. Now, while I have my mask down, I'm going to go ahead and create my ground and my sky. I like to do this with distress inks. It's quick, it's easy, it adds a little bit more texture, and I can also color over this with different mediums, and it will create some nice shadows that way. But you can use your coloring medium if you want to do this a different way, whatever you feel comfortable doing, whatever you like best. and works best for you, use that. So I just moused off the bottom and used 2 different colors of brown distress ink. I used Walnut Stain and Vintage Photo just for a little bit of interest to add 2 different colors there. Then I use the Stitch Scallops die set. I use the medium scallop in that. Die cut a scrap piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of Salty Ocean Distress ink right above those to create a nice cloudy sky. Now this isn't going to look like much at first, but once I come back in with my colored pencils, which is what I'll be using to color in my images today, once I come back in with those and add a little bit of shadow, this will really make that sky pop out. So this is just the first layer of color. You can see I'm going all the way up to the very top, and this rectangle that I die cut does have stitching in it, so it is going to pick up some of that stitching, and it just gives a nice little texture and helps the stitching pop out a little bit more. Now, where I didn't feel like there was enough color, especially in those little triangles that the clouds create, I come back in with a second layer of ink to really darken those up. Now, this is my favorite part, is taking off my little mask that I've put down and revealing the entire scene. While you're doing this, it looks so funny. You never know if it's going right until you take this all off and then you see your complete scene. Now, if you are just starting out masking scenes and you don't feel comfortable just stamping and going along, you can create a little map like I do sometimes for really intricate scenes. And don't do any masking. Just stamp out your images where you want them to go. If they overlap, that's fine. Use a scrap piece of cardstock for that. And then once you have your scene the way you want it, use that as like a little map whenever you go and create your actual scene on your card. That way you know what needs to be in front, what needs to go behind what mask you need to create, and that will save you a little bit of time and a little bit of wondering if everything's going okay. So I'll be using my colored pencils. I'm using Prismacolor colored pencils in Gamsol and blending stumps to blend everything out. However, you can use Crayola pencils, Crazy Art pencils, you can use alcohol markers, whatever you want to do to get this image colored in. So I just chose out a few different colors. I'm quickly scribbling in my color, and then I'll come back in with my blending stump and my Gamsol and really just blend that out. Now, I did not film the entire coloring into this scene. We are just starting in on baseball season and things are really hectic right now, so I didn't have time to completely film in the coloring of this. I did a little bit of it on the go, but you'll see once I get it all colored in, you'll see that I carry different colors all the way across this scene. So I use different colors of browns, different purples, greens, things like that, so that way it carries the eye all the way across the scene and it looks more cohesive. What I also did was take my colored pencils, I added in shadows along the ground with some browns, darker browns, and then in the sky I added shadows behind the clouds where the actual white clouds would be and the sky would be a little bit darker blue. I added in darker blues there right around those scallops, and that just gives the scene a little bit more depth, a little bit more interest, and help those clouds pop out against that white background. Now, like I said in the beginning of the video, I went ahead and whenever I did this die cut inlay, I knew I wanted the frame to be popped up against that scene that I created. This is going to add a shadow and make it appear like it really is a true frame. Now, you can use foam tape for this. However, it makes me a little crazy to try and cut foam tape in half for these thin lines. So I just use Fun Foam and double-sided adhesive, the very thin 1/8 of an inch double-sided adhesive. I just put that on some Fun Foam strips and put that down, and then I can cut them to the length I need, and I don't have to worry about cutting sticky strips in half, and then I get mad and the whole card kind of falls apart. So this is just my preferred way. Now, once I have those down all around the 4 sides, and I did put it down on all 4 sides because whenever you're putting up a frame, a very small, thin frame like this, you need that kind of foundation underneath of it, or else it's just going to fall flat against the card and you'll lose the whole effect. Once I had that down and centered on an A2 top folding white card base, I went ahead and put that scene panel down right inside of it, just inlaid it right down with just straight adhesive. This way it's on 2 different levels. Now I'm going to be using the Thanks a Bushel sentiment from that stamp set. And I'll just stamp that in the top left-hand corner with the black dye ink. You can see I did season it up a little bit on a scrap piece of paper just to make sure it's stamped well. And that finishes off the card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll leave you with this close-up and a few pictures of the finished card. On the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a few different links you can click on. The top will take you to a video that you might enjoy watching next. The bottom left will take you to the supply list for this card, and the bottom right will subscribe you to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!